It's been a while since I've done one of these videos, going over your Assassin's Creed hot takes. In fact, it's been a full year, and during that time, a lot has gone down. Assassin's Creed Shadows got released, the Black Flag remake keeps popping up with rumours and leaks, Ubisoft cancelled an Assassin's Creed game set during the post-Civil War, Assassin's Creed Mirage got a DLC, Mark Alexis Cote, the former head of the franchise, has left the company, and plenty more happened. But that's not the point of this video. I asked for your Assassin's Creed hot takes and look at how many I received. Holy moly. Now, of course, I'm not capable of going over every single one because that's impossible. So don't get offended or upset if I've not featured yours. I'm sure you can see why. So without further ado, let's just get into the first hot take. R520 Jr. says, there is not a single character who can realistically hide in plain sight other than Jacob. He's the only character who looks like he's wearing normal clothes. Altair has swords and knives all over him. Ezio wears a cape and armor. Hell, even Evie has the long coat and is the only woman in the city wearing pants. Is that true? The hoods alone make them stick out. Jacob just looks like a guy. And you know what? You're spot on. If we are talking about pure blending into the respected time period that a specific character is in, I do think Jacob's outfit is the most normal looking. I mean, if I ever got teleported back in time somehow, I would very easily distinguish, Ezio in a crowd, or Connor in a crowd, or Arno, or whoever. And it's definitely because of the long flowing robes with a hood. I think Jacob's outfit literally embodies the Victorian era down to a T, especially with the coat and the flat cap. If you think about it, it's the true definition of hide in plain sight. So yeah, I agree with this hot take. Arturo Lombre says Black Flag is overrated and people only like it because of the ship combat. Okay, now you see that's a hot take. I disagree in many ways. For one, I think the ship combat is probably something about Assassin's Creed that fans are split on. And I feel like if I was to do a poll on who likes the naval combat and who doesn't, you'd be surprised because it would be close to 50-50. And second of all, Edward goddamn Kenway. Are we just gonna casually brush over such a great protagonist? Third, the story. And fourth, the characters. I would say Black Flag has the best set of characters in the entire franchise. And it's not even close. All of them are great. I'd probably say Assassin's Creed 3 has the best, villains and Templars. But Black Flag deserves its praise. We can't disrespect such a great game. Oh, and by the way, you know what's funny? Under your hot take that you commented, this was the very next hot take I saw. So again, I did just say the fanbase is split on naval stuff. Sasuke says, if Yasuke wasn't- wait, that rhymed. If Yasuke wasn't in Shadows, the story would be 10 times worse. And that is so true. Yasuke in Shadows absolutely carried the story for me personally. It is a shame that all the discourse and hate the game got was aimed at Yasuke. You can try and say it's more than that, but that's just a shit excuse to justify the hate train for Yasuke. Because if those people who are part of the discourse actually played the game, they would know Yasuke is a well-written character. That said, we have to remember Ubisoft had to write two main characters at the same time, which most likely explains why the overall writing of the game feels weaker compared to a single protagonist game. But yeah, as for the hot take itself, I'm with you 100%. The Templar stuff and, the Nobunaga flashbacks with Yasuke were some of the best parts of the story. Jackson, shout out to you by the way, amazing YouTuber, he says the older combat is better than the newer combat. Assassin's Creed 1 to Syndicate is better than Origins to Shadows. I genuinely think this is a spicy take. And you are right, Jackson, I get why you feel like this is a spicy take, but I still disagree that the older combat was better, and I think a big part of that comes from finishers. The OG game centered everything on the counterkill system, and what was the payoff that we all waited to see? The finishers. Those animations went so hard. There were so many of them as well. Some finishers even carried into 3 or 4 enemies in one sequence, or maybe even 5 I think. But I do think people mix that up with actual depth, and they are not the same thing. I mean, moment to moment, the old combat often boiled down to waiting for a swing from an enemy, pressing the one button to counter, and then the enemy was dead. I kid you not, you could take out maybe 20-30 enemies with one hand on the controller. Now yes, it is exciting to look at, it's light to play, but the newer games, especially with how modern gaming standards have evolved, expect a lot more from you as a player. There's spacing you have to worry about, there's proper parrying, there's perfect dodges. I guess you can say abilities too, even though I'm not really much of a fan of abilities in the franchise. And there's even target swaps with a hitbox based system. Even the enemy variety felt like you had to manage systems, like brutes and shield enemies. These types of enemies literally force you to change your gear system. You also have the likes of ranged enemies that force you to adapt to that specific scenario. scenario. That said, I'm not stupid. There are a few things the older combat system has, which the newer combat system completely abandoned. I mean, for example, as I already said, the finishers. There used to be so many of them. Now, it feels like there's maybe 2 or 3 per weapon. There's also disarming, which needs to return, grabbing enemies, which needs to return, and then tossing those enemies into other enemies, which needs to return, and using enemies' weapons against them. I think the perfect middle ground would be Unity's combat mixed with the best parts of the old and new systems. Now, Rhino said about 5 hot takes, but I'm only going to focus on this one. And he says Basim is the only interesting thing from Assassin's Creed since Revelations. Now, this is a criminally dog hot take, and I would never cuss out people's opinions, but the fact that you have just said that meant that you have dismissed years and years of interesting things since Revelations. Now, mind you, you're not even talking about the games here. You are talking about interesting things. So, for example, you are saying Edward Kenway is interesting, Black Flag is not interesting, Blackbeard is interesting, Unity or Syndicate cities and layout is not interesting, Bayek is not interesting, the pyramids, the black box missions in Syndicate or Unity, the memory corridors in Origins and Valhalla, you know what I mean? And then to make things worse, Basim? Out of anything and anyone you could have mentioned, you mentioned Basim? He's probably, in my opinion, one of the least interesting protagonists in the franchise. Now, do note, I said protagonist, I'm not talking about Valhalla Basim, because Valhalla Basim is very interesting. Mirage Basim, on the other hand, has the personality of a brick wall. But your hot take is still crazy. I mean, you are basically saying this cutscene from Assassin's Creed Origins is not interesting. Or, oh my god, how could I almost forget? You are saying Charles, Lee and Haytham are not interesting. Let's just move on. This hot take just flicked a switch in me. Hush says they needed more character sequels rather than constant gameplay changes. I think this is common knowledge by now. I mean, if you want your games to be remembered and talked about for years to come, just like how the older games are more talked about compared to the newer games, you cannot just keep pressing reset with every new game. We need to see continuity again in the franchise. And I'm not just talking about character sequels. The modern day needs to continue from game to game. We need to see returning characters again, not just protagonists. I mean actual characters, similar to how we can see Haytham in Assassin's Creed 3 and Rogue, Desmond from Assassin's Creed 1 to AC3. Just basic continuity. But yeah, protagonist wise, we need a Bayek sequel, we need an Edward Kenway second game, even, you know, an Arno sequel. I want to see what he got up to in Egypt. Alexis says, Brotherhood is overrated and carried by nostalgia. The map is just not suited to parkour and is so frustrating. The story isn't that great and would be called mid without Ezio. Plus Machiavelli's arc is very disappointing and wasted. You know, you saying Brotherhood would be mid without Ezio is like saying The Witcher 3 would be mid without Geralt, or Uncharted would be mid without Nathan Drake. Of course it would. That's the main goddamn character. You can't just remove the protagonist from the equation. That makes no sense at all. I will partially agree with you on the story though. I do think Brotherhood has the weakest narrative of the Ezio trilogy, but that doesn't mean it's bad. The pacing gets a little rough, especially near the end with that sudden time skip. And as for your take about parkour, I'm sorry, but I've got to say, that seems like more of a skill issue than a design flaw. The parkour in the Ezio trilogy is pretty much perfect for its time, especially with how each city layout complements it. This was a sad hot take. Hansno says, the early days of World War I is perfect for a full-length title. The war literally began because of an assassination. Yeah, this is a great idea. And it actually makes a lot of sense because World War I literally started because of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So it would be a perfect fit for Assassin's Creed. I mean, we've already seen Assassin's Creed experiment with war settings before. We had Lydia Fry's World War I sequence in Syndicate, which was a great example, even though it was just side content, but it was such a cool concept. Then there's Arno's Eiffel Tower mission set during World War II, which nailed the atmosphere perfectly. If Ubisoft really wanted to, they could very easily make the game. The problem is, I just don't trust this current Ubisoft to handle a story like that. I mean, think about it, they've already backed out of a project like that post-Civil War Assassin's Creed game because of political concerns. That said, with Marc Alexis Cote leaving Ubisoft recently, maybe there's hope that these kinds of ideas get another shot. Marty Barron says, in years down the line, people will look back at the Assassin's Creed franchise as wasted potential and how Ubisoft held it back. And you know what's sad about this hot take? It's completely true. The Assassin's Creed franchise has the freedom to explore any point in history. Now that alone means the series should never run out of ideas. History literally gives them endless possibilities. I always think about how crazy it would be if other big, video game companies got their hands on the IP. Imagine Sucker Punch making an Assassin's Creed game, or even Rockstar. Now sure, we'd probably wait a decade between releases with Rockstar, but you know, the end result would be something special, something worth the wait. Ubisoft hasn't done justice to feudal Japan at all with Shadows, and to be honest, that game feels like wasted potential, just like so many others in the franchise. It's almost become a trademark of the franchise at this point. In 20 years time, I can already see people saying, remember Assassin's Creed, that video game series? Those games could have been so much more. Miguel says, Valhalla has the best modern day since AC3 and it's not even close. Facts. I mean, I think this is a normal take, to be honest. Since Assassin's Creed 3, we've had Black Flag and Rogue's modern day, which was terrible. It was some first person thing. Unity and Syndicate had cutscenes for a modern day. Origins was because we were so limited to that one cave. Odyssey was decent, to be fair, especially with the DLC, I thought, and Valhalla was great. It's a shame that Mirage and Shadows gave us absolutely nothing. Please give us the modern day back again with Hexe. I want to see present day Basim again. I want to actually play as these characters. I want to witness the storyline. I don't want whatever this is. Khaled says, Olag in Assassin's Creed Valhalla was so much fun. I'll be so honest with you, I didn't even touch that minigame in Valhalla, so I don't even know if it's fun or not. Adam Moss says, Aya should have been the main protagonist for Origins. Fuck to the no. I do not care if the original plan was for Bayek to die and Aya would have then taken over as the main character. The Bayek that we got is great. Give Aya a DLC, how about that? But never did she deserve to be the main character of Origins. People who say she did are basing it on that one headline that said Aya was supposed to be the main character, and that is all. There's no real proof that she would have been a better protagonist than Bayek. Nothing about that in the game shows that. Oh, and you know what's hilarious? This is the next hot take I saw when I scrolled. I swear to God, I'm not faking it. Enrique says, Assassin's Creed has never been amazing, just decent games. And as crazy as what I'm about to say sounds, I don't disagree. When you look at how much the Assassin's Creed games cost to make and the size of the teams working on them, you would expect so much more. The developments are on par with studios like Naughty Dog, CD Projekt Red, Santa Monica, those big AAA studios. But the quality comparison is nowhere near, and that's embarrassing when you think about it. If your game costs around 150 to 200 million to make and the writing is weak, the cutscenes are outdated, and the world feels like it's empty, that's a huge red flag. I mean, look at The Witcher 3 and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Both games were made with much smaller budgets, and both were made by, at the time of their development, way smaller studios. I mean, CD Projekt Red was very small at that point, the same with Warhorse Studios. Yet the quality is miles ahead. Those games feel like once-in-a-generation games. Assassin's Creed, on the other hand, has always just been okay. Now you may be thinking, well, why do you make videos on the franchise if you think it's mid or okay? And that's a good question, because what keeps me attached is the lore, the sci-fi elements, the historical settings, the modern day, the assassins vs Templars, the deep philosophies, stuff like that. If Ubisoft could finally fix their writing department and stop being so cheap with cutscenes and animating, this franchise could very easily go from decent to great. Welsh Gamer says, the modern day concept in AC Shadows is not a bad idea conceptually, since it's going back to AC1's roots of the modern day being a near future dystopia. They just need to flesh it out more and tie it with more older games. And I would say hell to the no, because there is nothing interesting about watching two AI programs talk to each other while a nobody character stands there in an anime simulation with zero dialogue or zero interaction, just watching them talk. The only part that is cool is the idea of the Animus Hub launcher. The modern day should never, and I mean never, be handled the way Shadows did it. It just makes me want to shoot my— Adam says, the RPG Assassin's Creed are overall better than Phase 1 of AC. There are some things that the originals did better, but the depth and variety of gameplay, the way the settings are showcased, etc. are a lot more robust in the RPGs. This ties back to what I said earlier about combat and gameplay. There are plenty of things the older games did way better than what we see in the newer games. The first thing that comes to mind is the story. The older games completely outshines the newer ones when it comes to storytelling, protagonists, characters, and overall writing. Gameplay wise, sure, the newer games have improved mechanics, except for parkour, but that can really go either way depending on what you prefer. As for settings, I'll give credit where it's due. The newer games do a great job showing the scale of their time periods, but the older games handle historical events and landmarks much better. Assassin's Creed 2, for example, had incredible landmarks, so did Assassin's Creed 1. So yeah, this hot take can go either way depending on what you prefer. Luger says, if the DLC for Mirage adds to the overall quality of the story and presentation and the parkour editions work as intended, Mirage will easily be a top 5 in the franchise. Ah man, if only that's how video games worked. I will say though, if the DLC has a good story, and that's a big if, I do think Mirage as a game will be looked at more positively. But unfortunately, a game cannot suddenly get a lot better because of a DLC. The base game story of Mirage is quite weak, and that's sadly what most people look for. But we're gonna have to wait and see. I do think this DLC story will be better than the base game though, because you know, when I was at Ubisoft Bordeaux studio last month, or was it 2 months ago, I don't know, I recall them talking about how much more emotional and grounded this story is, and I even remember them mentioning how there's more motion captured cutscenes, so hey, who knows? I do hope the parkour improvements are good, but my only worry about that is that they don't carry this over into future games, because as we know, Ubisoft have a tendency to not build on what worked well. Syed says Basim is the true successor to Ezio. Hell to the no. Are you Rhino on an alt account? What the fuck? Indiana Jones himself says, ever since Unity, the series writing has felt completely soulless and devoid of passion. Video Game Donkey said it best, I don't know how they managed to fuck up the premise of going back in time to look through the eyes of the assassin. I know exactly what you mean. Even though Unity's story wasn't the strongest, I completely agree that the franchise has lost its soul when it comes to storytelling. And to be honest, the reasons are pretty clear. First of all, the constant rotations of studios needs to stop. The tone and writing style between Ubisoft Montreal and Ubisoft Quebec are completely different. It's like two separate franchises. Second, Ubisoft just doesn't have the same writing talent it used to, and that's a harsh truth, but it's reality. Aside from Darby McDevitt, there is nobody left at Ubisoft from the older days who understood what made these stories hit so hard. And third, the shift to the RPG formula came at a huge cost, mainly the story. These games used to be grounded in, you know, that constant meaningful ideological conflict, especially between the Assassins and Templars. Now that focus is gone. Once Assassin's Creed goes back to a single city, linear story driven setup, I do think that depth can return. Hey, hopefully Hexe is that game, but I'm not gonna lie, it's hard to tell right now, especially with how unpredictable Ubisoft are. It wouldn't surprise me if they somehow fired Darby McDevitt for no reason at all. That's Ubisoft right now. Farhan or FarVNH says, the historical / ancestor story needs to be in contingent with the modern day facing another apocalypse like the 2012 end of the world conspiracy, I think, where you can finally affect the outcome / timeline of the modern day by doing something in the past that works with the artifacts. Now, yes, and yes, absolutely. That's what made the early games so interesting to me. It was the past and present that actually connected. So when Desmond was reliving his ancestors' memories, everything he did, literally everything, had a purpose to stopping the 2012 apocalypse. It's frustrating now because the historical story feels like its own thing, and the modern day also feels like its own thing, even though it's not really there anymore. There's no real payoff or sense that what you're doing in the past is changing anything in the present. I think it was kind of happening with Valhalla and the whole solar flare situation with Layla, but where on earth did that go? Who knows? It would be so incredible if Ubisoft brought that back. You know, where actions with the pieces of Eden or certain choices in the ancestor's life could alter the modern day outcome. That's what I would dream of. Cosmic says Ezio is overrated, oh god, and him having 3 mainline games to himself set the expectations of other Assassin's Creed protagonists way too high. Let me ask you a question. Why do you think he got 3 games? If you can answer that question, you will realize how stupid these hot takes are. Matland PKC says Assassin's Creed Shadows Stealth is the best in the series. It's so hard to go back and play the older games that have no dedicated crouch button and no prone feature. I don't know why I was struggling to read the word prone. But anyway, I agree. Its core stealth system is the best. That's my opinion. But man, imagine how much better it would be if Assassin's Creed Shadows Stealth had, let's say, proper social stealth, as in crowd blending, bench sitting. But you know, then again, I think Ubisoft made a big mistake going with a fully open world approach for feudal Japan. In my personal opinion, I think a focused, linear style game set in that period could have worked a lot better. It would have allowed for the mission design to actually complement the stealth a lot better. We could have had, you know, black box missions similar to Unity or Syndicate. There would be actual dense Japanese cities and way more controlled stealth opportunities instead of those, you know, wide empty spaces. But hey ho, we got what we got, I guess. We can't do anything about it. Unpartisan says Arno is the saddest protagonist. Ooh, that's a good take because it's up for debate. Let's see. We got Arno. I mean, Arno lost Elise. Arno lost his father, and you know, he lost that purpose that drove him. You could say Connor as well because he lost his village. I mean, he got burned along with his mother, which was quite tragic, and even his closest friends kind of betrayed him, kind of. I would have also said Edward Kenway, but your hot take was about the saddest, not the tragic one. So maybe not Edward Kenway. Ooh, maybe Bayek actually. Bayek lost Kemu. He split up with Aya, despite clearly you can see he struggled with that. He got forgotten in history. Yeah, I'd say Bayek. He seems like quite a sad protagonist protagonist. Or low-key maybe Cassandra, because spending 2500 years of your life alone sounds like hell on earth. That's a good shout, I think. PK says the reason why Altair is so loved was largely because of Assassin's Creed Revelations. I do think there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, for example, people like Assassin's Creed 1 because of how grounded it was, and most importantly because of Altair's redemption arc, going from arrogant and selfish to somebody who truly lived by the creed. He valued it so much that he ended up writing the codex and reshaping how the assassins operated for generations. Everything that we played after Assassin's Creed 1 stems from Altair. You know, he really embodies what an assassin is meant to be. Revelations did play a massive role in cementing that legacy too. I do agree, without that game, I do think Altair would have been mostly forgotten over time. So yeah, I guess your hot take is valid. MT Muppet says Connor Kenway is a good character, and people only hated him specifically because he wasn't Ezio, and nostalgia was clouding their judgment. You know, the way you described how people feel about Connor is exactly what I used to feel about Connor years ago. I mean, here's what I thought about Connor 2 years ago before replaying Assassin's Creed 3 again. You see, the main issue that prevents me from fully embracing Connor as a character that I would rank highly is his lack of significant growth throughout the game. He starts off as a naive child and matures into, well, a naive adult, without much development in between. And now I am the complete opposite. Connor is such a great character, and I do kind of feel frustrated that to see his personality shine, and to see more of him, you have to play through the whole Homestead storyline in Assassin's Creed 3, which is side content. So if you haven't and you're watching this, trust me, go back to Assassin's Creed 3, replay the game, and make sure you do the Homestead storyline. You will love it, and you will also love Connor a lot more. Unbangarcon19 says, Assassin's Creed fans are impossible to please. A decade ago, people complained that the game was too easy, and now with the rumored Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake removing counter-based combat, they're whining again. It's the same cycle with so many other changes. You know, setting the Black Flag stuff aside in your hot take, I completely agree that Assassin's Creed fans are impossible to please. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm part of the problem too. You're part of the problem too, even if you don't realize it. No matter what Ubisoft does, whether it's good or bad, there will always be complaints. I remember back during the older games I used to play, I used to nitpick the hell out of those too. None of them were perfect, and that's part of why the fanbase is so divided. The franchise itself is all over the place. There's just too many different types of fans to satisfy. But at the same time, that's a problem that Ubisoft created when they, started milking the franchise. They tried to appeal to everybody, and well, look what happened. Now it feels like nobody is ever truly happy. Subscribe to the Hidden One says, my hot take is that you should subscribe to the Hidden One. Hey, I agree. I like this guy. Whoever this guy is, I like you.